A film set should be a professional environment, but for these celebrities, it was a breeding ground of pain. Welcome to Beyond the Screen, I'm Nate, and these are 10 actors who got fired for being rude on set. Number 10, Lindsay Lohan. In the early 2000s, Lindsay Lohan faced a ton of public scandals, but one that's not talked about often enough actually took place behind the scenes of a little show called Ugly Betty. Lohan was a guest star on the show in the third season playing Kimmy Keegan. Kimmy was supposed to stick around for 6 total episodes, but that number was shrunken down to just 4. The reason being was her co-star and, the lead of the show, America Ferrera, just didn't get along with Lindsay on set. According to America and several of the Ugly Betty crew members, Lindsay would just show up with an entourage of people, usually under the influence of herbs and spices, and the production crew had to repaint her dressing room when she left because it was just so messed up. One crew member alleged that she would cut images of her own face out of magazines and tabloid articles as if she were making a collage of some kind. America claims that one scene took over 30 takes to get right because they just kept flubbing their lines. Lindsay's team of buddies have been adamant that America had too much power and was the sole reason that she was asked to leave the show. Unfortunately, if you do bad things, enough people know about it, karma comes around. Number 9, Julianne Moore. Creative differences, the phrase that has been behind some of the most tragic Hollywood stories in films that could have been, and in this case, roles. For an industry centered around creativity, the movie industry can be awfully risk-averse, especially when it comes to the decision of casting a lead. Now, it's not uncommon for actors to suddenly be thrust out of productions in lieu of a new face, or in some cases, the original choice that you were replacing. A good example of doing it yourself, though, is Julianne Moore. The actor from films like the 2013 reboot of Gere and the action flick Kingsman: Golden Circle was set to play the leading lady in the critically acclaimed dramedy Can You Ever Forgive Me? And she was casted as the character Lee Israel, a writer who falls out of step with current culture and decides to embellish her writing, basically inventing the concept of fake news. Julianne began filming her scenes, but was asked to leave the production only 1 month into filming. According to the director Nicole Holofner, portrayal of her character just wasn't what she had in mind while writing. Julianne played the role with too much of herself influencing the overall appeal. When directed to try to play the role another way, Julianne continued to give a similar performance, and she was ultimately replaced by Melissa McCarthy, better known for her more comedic roles in movies like The Heat and Bridesmaids, but her turn as Lee is considered to be one of her greatest acting achievements of all time, even landing her a nomination for Best Actress at the 2019 Oscar ceremony. Julianne didn't take the news all that well, but did eventually move on and has made a couple of solid flicks since, so it all worked out in the end for everybody. Number 8, Henry Winkler. Henry Winkler is best known for his role as the Fonz on Happy Days, and he was set to direct Tom Hanks in the much-loved buddy cop movie Turner and Hooch. Unfortunately, these two had a pretty rough history together before that. The Fonz had actually fought with Hanks in character on the set of Happy Days for an episode a few years before, and it would appear that Tom wishes that he could fight Henry for real. As rumor has it, the two of them just didn't get along at all, so much so that a few days into filming Turner and Hooch, with Henry behind the wheel, Tom ordered Winkler to be removed from the set and replaced as director. That's the kind of power Tom Hanks wields. He can just walk on set and be like, no. Not only did Tom complain that Henry's behavior as director was annoying, he complained that Henry was just overall bad at his job. It would take double the average time to reset a shot on set, he had minimal control over his actors, and he was apparently very frustrated with having a dog on the set. Like, did he even read the script before he took the job? That dog is a national treasure. What makes this firing even more tragic is the fact that when Winkler was delivered the news, one of the film's producers ripped Henry's contract up in front of his face. Over the years, when asked about the incident, Henry denies that he's ever had any kind of personal or professional issues with Tom Hanks. Tom's never given us any reason to think that he would lie about something like that. What would he have to gain? I defeated the Fonz. Hey, so did ABC when they canceled his show. Number 7, Jean-Claude Van Damme. The Belgian actor Jean-Claude Van Damme was just on the verge of coming into his own career as the Muscles from Brussels when he landed a job opposite of Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1987's action flick Predator. Now, this sounded like the perfect casting choice, right? Jean would have worked alongside the likes of Carl Weathers and Jesse Ventura, and while that may have turned out cool, the reality was that Jean wasn't casted to play a role as one of the Marines at all. Instead, he was casted to play the titular Predator himself. The special effects artist behind the project called the experience with Jean as a hilarious comedy of errors, in which nobody knew exactly what the other was expecting. Apparently, nobody had informed Jean that the role was basically just a glorified glorified stuntman. They were prepared to direct him to just hop around like a frog, but John was obviously confused and upset with this choice. According to John, he had just gotten off the boat, and he was under the impression that he was going to be showcasing his martial arts skills to the world, but was instead reduced to a massive, slow-moving alien with dreadlocks. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, Van Damme was furious and dispirited about spending this entire movie coked up in a clunky and often ridiculous-looking suit, and was ultimately fired and replaced with Kevin Peter Hall. The idea that he was just on set like, I can barely move in this thing, just brings me so much joy. Number 6, Shia Labeouf. In 2013, Alec Baldwin was attached to star in a Broadway production of the show Orphans alongside Transformers alumni Shia Labeouf. Now, from day one of rehearsal, Shia and Baldwin were at each other's throats. Shia's problem was that Alec was not off script. This was something that he considered to be very unprofessional. Shia has since claimed that he was so nervous about the show that he made sure to memorize his lines before he even set foot on the stage. His methods were not reciprocated by Alec, who simply showed up with a coffee in one hand and a script in the other one, planning to rehearse in the moment. Shia was furious and apparently yelled at Alec to learn his lines right now. He was the lead. That's the deal. After a couple of weeks and one particularly rough day where Shia blew up at him in front of a ton of cast and crew, Alec took 5 and had a meeting with the producers. He said that if Shia wasn't let go, that he was gonna quit. Well, producers caved and Shia was let go. In the tabloid, they claimed creative differences, but Shia later shared his side, clearly upset with being dropped as if he meant nothing to the show. Number 5, Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper is one of the groundbreaking actors and directors of the 1960s and 70s New Hollywood. Now, eventually finding his niche in the early 90s, playing villains in films like Speed, Waterworld, and the live-action Mario movie where he plays Bowser. Yes, that exists. No, it's not good. So, it came as no surprise when he was casted to play Kristoff, the all-powerful TV producer controlling Truman Burbank's life in the film The Truman Show. The cast was stacked and it included Hollywood heavyweight Jim Carrey as the titular Truman. Anyone with a brain cell would have been excited to be a part of this movie, still considered to be one of Jim's best dramatic performances. However, 2 days into filming his scenes for Kristoff, which were only supposed to take 10 days to film, Hopper was unceremoniously let go from the set. Apparently, Dennis had a contract in place with producer Scott Rudin that he would be fired should his work be unsatisfactory. He must have been pretty bad in the role, as the director Peter Weir has been described as extremely reluctant to ever remove an actor from a movie. Reports later surfaced that Hopper was basically half asleep while playing the character, and while Kristoff wasn't written to be, a manic madman, he did require just a little bit of effort to be properly portrayed. Ultimately, Ed Harris stepped in to play the role after production had been desperately trying to replace Dennis to avoid having this film be shut down entirely. Thankfully, that never happened, and The Truman Show has gone on to be one of the most depressingly heartfelt films Jim Carrey has ever made. Oh, and Ed actually got nominated for an Oscar, so sorry Dennis, looks like they made a good move. Number 4, Eric Stoltz. Alright, here, let's talk about a little bit of the 1985 comedy sci-fi Back to the Future. I loved this movie growing up. The story followed Marty McFly, a high school student who's accidentally sent back to 1955 in a DeLorean invented by his close friend and scientist Dr. Emmett Brown, played by Christopher Lloyd, and no, we're not going to talk about that friendship even though it's a little strange. And they're forced to get his future parents together before he disappears from existence. Now, whoever pitched this movie must have been lacking some sleep. The film went on to spawn 2 sequels, creating what's considered to be one of the greatest film trilogies of all time, and while Michael J. Fox may have played the iconic Marty McFly, he actually wasn't the first actor to put on that puffy vest. A young man named Eric Stoltz was initially casted to play the role. You may not recognize Eric because his most famous character was drenched in prosthetics and makeup, playing the character of Roy L. Dennis in the film Mask, a man with severe facial and skull deformities. He was nearly halfway through shooting this movie when the news came that he was going to be replaced by Michael J. Fox. Fox was the director Robert Zemeckis' first choice, but he was initially unable to sign on to the project because of his prior commitments to the show Family Ties. Eventually, though, the 2 studios were able to find a way to make it work and allowed him to film both projects. This is why you may notice that a majority of Marty's scenes that take place outside are at night, because it was the only time that he could film for like 60% of this movie. Robert wanted Eric out from the very beginning though, because his portrayal of the character was just too intense, a lot more intense than the writers had in mind, not to mention Eric read the end of the movie as a tragedy instead of a happy ending. Spoiler alert for a movie that's like 40 years old. At the end of the first film, Marty returns to 1985 after successfully getting his parents together, but instead of being poor and depressed, the family is thriving and successful, and somehow Eric took that as Marty being an outsider in a world he didn't know. But just like, look at the truck he has parked in his garage. Like, nothing tragic about that. His intensity combined with his depressing performance of the finale got him kicked off of the film only minutes after Fox was available. Number 3, Alyssa Milano. Alright, let's talk about the show Charmed, a solid series that was on the air for 10 years. The series followed 3 sisters that discover they're descendants of a line of good female witches and are destined to fight against the forces of evil. Yeah, it was a fun show. However, just because you play sisters on set doesn't mean that you're gonna be close in real life. Rose McGowan and Alyssa Milano had a very public altercation that resulted in a little incident on set being shared with the world. Rose claimed that Alyssa threw a fit in front of the crew, yelling that they didn't pay her enough to do the things she was doing, only she didn't say things she was doing. She said a bad word. She called Alyssa's behavior appalling, claiming that she cried every time the show got renewed for another season because it meant more time on a toxic set. Alyssa never shared her own comments on the situation and was eventually let go from the show, confirming what she was being accused of. Number 2, Thomas Gibson. Thomas made a name for himself starring as one of the leads of the series Criminal Minds. He was on the show for a few years, and in that time he made a few problems for the people unfortunate enough to be staff members of the series. There were a few issues over the years that would have warranted some action, like screaming at producers and writers for not doing a good job, but the incident that got him kicked off the show for good involved a kick. In 2016, Thomas was swiftly fired from the series after an incident with a writer named Virgil Williams. An internal investigation revealed that Thomas kicked Virgil one day during production of an episode that Gibson was directing. Now, as I've said before, that was not the first incident on set that really should have resulted in some kind of punishment. In 2013, he pleaded no contest to no-no juice related reckless driving after being arrested under a DUI, and 3 years before that, he allegedly shoved an assistant director, Ian Wolfe, during a late night location scene. That led to the studio ordering Gibson to take 8 hours of anger management, which clearly worked out. According to most of the people on set though, Thomas was a wild card. Some days he'd be friendly and accommodating, and the next, nuts. And at number 1, Richard Gere. Richard Gere is one of those actors that doesn't really act. You know, sometimes people just get hired for films because they have a face for it or a style. For Richard Gere, he did not have enough class and moxie to keep a handle on his role in the film The Lords of the Flatbush. Now, he was cast as star alongside Rocky Balboa, Sylvester Stallone, and according to Sly, these two just didn't get along. Their beef was strong and long-lasting throughout production until it finally came to a head when one day Richard was just a little bit too into one scene and grabbed Sylvester aggressively by his collar. When Sly told him to lay off, he laid in instead. Now, the scene was being filmed on Coney Island, and when the actors took a minute to take a break, they tried to break each other. Sly was eating a hot dog alone in his car. Sounds peaceful, right? Well, then suddenly Richard came in and joined him with half of a chicken dripping in mustard. Despite Sly's warning about the mustard, it dripped all over his pants, and in true Rocky fashion, he elbowed Richard in the face and threw him out of his car. The altercation resulted in Richard being fired from the project. Oh no! We have to decide between Richard Gere and Sylvester Stallone. I wonder how quick that decision was. And those are some celebrities that were fired for being jerks on set. Would you like to see a part 2? Let us know in the comments below. Like the video if you had fun, and please follow our channel for more celebrity content each and every day. And we'll see you next time. Do it from the top.